It's nice to be able to see everybody. It's great. Um, so I'm absolutely delighted and we're very privileged to have Dr. Jeana DelRosso, who is Sister, I'm going to get this wrong, Maura Einik, Endowed Professor of English at Notre Dame of Maryland, University of Baltimore. She's the author of Writing Catholic Women, Contemporary International Catholic Girlhood Narratives. She's the co-editor with Lee Ike and Anna Koth of the Catholic Church and Unruly Women Writers, Critical Essays on Unruly Catholic Women Writers, Creative Responses to Catholicism. And her articles have appeared in books as well as journals, as a number of journals. And so we're really delighted that she's able to speak to us today. Today she's going to be speaking to us on unruly Catholic nuns. So we have some Catholic nuns here, so hopefully they won't be too unruly. So unruly Catholic nuns, creative responses to Catholicism. So thank you very much, Dr. DelRosso.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here today. And I'll just jump right in. So more than 2 decades into the 21st century, Roman Catholicism continues to make headlines. The sexual abuse scandals of the Catholic Church have brought international attention to Catholicism in ways that have focused on some of the most sensationalistic aspects of the religion, priestly celibacy, homosexuality in the ranks, and the concomitant attempts by the right to make pedophilia a gay issue, secrecy and cover-ups within the hierarchy. We have heard countless stories of young boys abused by priests, of bishops moving the abusers from one parish to another, of victims finally demanding justice through dogmatic, legal, and occasionally violent means. What seems to be missing from all the media fanfare, if one looks closely, is the role of women in these proceedings. Indeed, women have been excluded from the cardinals' meetings, have had no audience with the Pope, and if the absence of such stories from the news is to be believed, have not been the victims of such abuse. It is not an overstatement to suggest that women have been denied a full role in the functioning of the Catholic Church. Indeed, women bump their heads against the glass ceiling of the church hierarchy before they move very far up at all, as we are denied ordination to the priesthood and thus to entrance into the positions of bishops, cardinals, and pope. We are thereby prevented access to one of the seven sacraments, as well as denied the ability to dispense those sacraments. Those few women who have been ordained recently by rogue bishops have since been excommunicated by the official church. Countless women around the world find ourselves rooted in Catholic traditions while simultaneously yearning for a church that will grow with us and become better than and for us. Despite our love for the richness of Catholic culture, many of us cannot forgive the church's continual and persistent failure of so many of its constituents, especially women. The Me Too movement has inspired many women to share stories in protest against sexual assault, and it has motivated Roman Catholic women to speak out too. Anyone who has seen the Netflix series The Watchers, which shows women active in researching and revealing the truth about such issues, would be hard-pressed to keep their faith in the Catholic Church and its clergy, who undertake, participate in, and cover up the sexual abuse of both young girls and boys by Catholic priests. And yet, rather than attack the deeply embedded problem of sexual abuse of children by the male clergy, in 2012, the Vatican instead attacked nuns. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith's criticism of the US Leadership Conference of Women Religious attempted to shift the focus from sexually abusive priests to rogue American sisters who preach, quote, radical feminist themes incompatible with the Catholic faith, both in regard to homosexuality and birth control. Such dissimulation and discrimination are not the exception, but seem to be rather the rule of Rome. Now, recently, Pope Francis has been creating some positive change in this historically traditional institution. His focus on issues of social justice is refreshing. He has spoken out against poverty, religious intolerance, environmental destruction. He has loosened the communion restrictions on divorced and remarried Catholics. He has even made overtures toward women by commissioning 2 consecutive studies regarding the possibility of the diaconate for lay women and women religious, for which there is historical precedent in the early, although not the modern Catholic Church, and for which there is long-time precedent in other Christian faiths. He has backed down on the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith's criticism of the US Leadership Conference of Women Religious. He has spoken out against pay inequity for women. He has even criticized the church's intense focus on such divisive issues as abortion, contraception, and homosexuality. But he has not yet moved in the direction of changing papal doctrine on those issues. And his reforms have been limited at best. For one, he has only just begun to support the victims of clergy sexual abuse. While Pope Francis in 2014 appointed a commission for the protection of minors, it wasn't until August 2018 that he released a letter acknowledging the failures of the church, in which he wrote, quote, "We did not act in a timely manner, realizing the magnitude and the gravity of the damage done to so many lives. We showed no care for the little ones." And Francis has been particularly disappointing to women's groups seeking equality in the church hierarchy. As Celia Wexler points out, the first woman appointed to a managerial position in the Vatican's most important office, the Secretariat of State, did not actually replace a man, but rather was offered a new title for continuing to do work she was already doing. And as of today, no progress has been made on women's ordination to the diaconate, and the ordination of women to the priesthood remains a non-starter. Moreover, the Pope calling women theologians, quote, "the strawberry on the cake of the Catholic Church," can hardly be viewed as anything other than patronizing. Thus, his minor reform measures are dwarfed by the persistent patriarchy of the Roman Catholic Church today, in which nuns can never be priests, women can never hold positions of significant power, and gender inequality remains the rule. The regulations of Rome often limit women's abilities within the church community and our mobilities within the church hierarchy, preventing Catholic women from achieving full autonomy and from accessing leadership positions in the church system. But this explanation of the Catholic Church's position on women offers perhaps too simplistic a definition of women's actual positions in the church today. The Mary devotion present in contemporary Catholicism offers a strong female role model to many Catholic women, as do the numerous women saints. And 20th century Catholic figures such as Dorothy Day and Mother Teresa have provided the female faithful with sources of inspiration, hope, and even political reform. Today, it is arguable that female laity and women religious alike have been empowered to educate, to preach, and to minister, and that women have assumed leadership roles within the church hierarchy, if not officially in the priesthood. This seemingly contradictory status of women in the church and the both conflicting and conflicted standing of women in and with Catholicism manifest themselves in women's contemporary Catholic literature, a genre that, despite academic attention to women's literature in the past several decades, has largely gone unnoticed and unmined. Catholicism, like most religions, is looked upon suspiciously by academics, particularly in US secular institutions. English departments marginalize it, perhaps because academics consider religion incompatible with intellectualism. Cultural studies departments ignore it, at least in part because of, as Pamela Matthews puts it, quote, "the overwhelming visibility of the religious right with its talent for capturing the discursive center stage." Mary Wisner Hanks observes that queer and post-colonial theory also, quote, "has not used religion as one of its key categories of difference. If Christianity is discussed, it is as a peripheral element in the main story of imperialism or nationalism, or as a monolithic cultural force working in the background, invoked but not interrogated. Women's studies departments also disapprove of the religion, likely because, as I have already pointed out, Christianity remains steeped in misogyny, and because women continue to be excluded from much Roman Catholic ministry and practice. Wiesner-Hanks agrees, arguing that feminist scholarship avoids religion in general, quote, either because of hostility toward the subject or because the vast majority of work in women's and gender history came to focus on the modern world. This idea then that Catholic is both a dated and a dirty word for women may explain why so little feminist literary criticism has seriously considered representations of Catholicism as an important category of analysis. I would argue that this absence has done women a disservice. This internal gendered Catholic conflict appears in Shirley Guillac-Lin Lim's essay, Asians and Anglo-American Feminism, Reciprocity and Resistance, which investigates the intersections of Catholicism with other socioeconomic and political forces. Combating the religious amnesia of contemporary feminist literary theory and challenging the impulse to isolate religion from literary studies, Lim describes how she first came to feminism through its intersection with Catholicism. It is not insignificant that Lim's exposure to Catholicism occurs through her Catholic training, her Catholic school training by nuns. Educated in a convent school, Lim found feminism in the convent community, whom she envisioned as, quote, dangerous women, living outside the protection of the Confucianist family, Asians and whites together, thriving in open defiance of what centuries of Chinese civilization have shaped as natural for humans. They lived without men, outside of marriage, without children of their own, doing the kind of work that men do. They were women who were like men, that I was given to their care every day from 7:30 a.m. to 2 p.m., that Chinese parents were deferential to them, were intimidated and made smaller by their presence. These facts did not pass by me unremarked. The subversiveness of Catholicism for Lim thus moves beyond its effect on class and familial hierarchies to embrace the dissolution of racial rules and gender roles. The convent offers for Lim an alternative to the fate of the traditional Chinese woman who can only become wife, daughter-in-law, mother, a person defined through her usefulness to others. The women religious at the convent reject all three roles, and in doing so undermine gender divisions of power and authority. Their community calls into question notions of both racial and sex role segregation, and thus provides Lim with a space in which a woman can be independent of husband, family, and cultural traditions. Finally, the convent offers Lim an education, the means to independence through fulfilling work, and a route to feminism. Many feminist theologians similarly read the convent as a site of feminist awareness and achievement. Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza claims that she, like Lim, came to feminism through Catholicism because her Christian faith and community caused her to question and ultimately to reject cultural roles for women. Sister Mary Ewens of the Dominican Order, writing more specifically about women religious, extols the feminist opportunities offered in single-sex religious communities in her 1979 essay, Removing the Veil, The Liberated American Nun. Quote, in their personal lives and in the work they have enjoyed, many of the freedoms and opportunities, and in their work they have enjoyed many of the freedoms and opportunities that feminists are pleading for today. They have supported themselves, owned property, received an advanced education, and held executive positions. They have not feared success, have had mentors who gave them encouragement and advice, and have been freed from the responsibilities of marriage and motherhood. They have transcended sex role stereotypes and enjoyed friendships based not on sexuality, but on common interests and a sharing of the deepest aspirations of the human soul. Ewens's characterization of women religious echoes Lim's early experience with the sisters at her convent school, affirming the notion of the convent as a site of female independence and growth. Sarah Maitland's character, Sister Anna, in the novel Virgin Territory, reinforces this belief, arguing that, quote, over a long historical period, the religious life has offered women a lot of autonomy, both individually, all those medieval women having access to learning and self-determination, and as a role model for other women, an abiding sign that marriage and childbirth aren't the only options. And Nancy Mears, in her memoir, Ordinary Time, Cycles in Marriage, Faith and Renewal, also admires the active, self-ruling sisters who led her to Catholicism, quote, who spent their summer vacations with the farm workers in the fields, in the camps, in the jails, who would run for the state legislature and win. Clearly, feminist writers have found a positive location for women in the convent's liberating stance regarding issues of gender, race, class, and sexuality. When my Unruly Catholic Women Writers series co-editors and I began to think about nuns, we knew exactly whom we wanted to represent, what stories we wanted to relate, which voices we wanted to make heard. We wanted to tell the sisters' stories, and we knew those stories were out there. We also knew exactly what and whom we were referring to when we were thinking of unruly nuns, although the nuns we reached out to frequently did not see themselves in that way. One told us she wasn't unruly enough to be in our volume. Others demurred, saying that they had nothing to write. And even when they submitted something to us, many sisters offered disclaimers to their pieces, referring to them as incomplete or a draft or just some ideas. This, I have found in my experience, is characteristic of nuns, unwilling to talk about themselves, unassuming in regard to their own work and abilities, humble to a fault. But we know who they really are. They are Mother Teresa, internationally recognized for decades of work with the poor in India. They are Sister Simone Campbell, the force behind Nuns on the Bus, addressing social justice issues such as immigration reform and welfare legislation across the United States. They are Sister Helen Prejean, tireless despite 50 years of advocacy to end capital punishment and to influence the Catholic Church's opposition to all execution. They are Sister Janine Gramick, known for her work with the LGBTQ community, who are often ostracized from the Catholic Church. They are self-sacrificing. They are unpretentious. They are quietly and without fanfare doing God's business in the world, carrying out small or large tasks, taking care of a child or a nation, performing the work of Christ. The nuns I know are intelligent, dedicated, often strategic about how best to use resources and how to maneuver around, across, and through the institutional church in order to do the work that God calls them to do. I often tell the story of one of my former colleagues, a nun who was well into her 70s at the time when she was still teaching religious studies at a Catholic college. And when the Baltimore bishop issued a directive discouraging theology professors from teaching about women's ordination in the Catholic Church, she gave out the readings on the topic to her students in class and told them to discuss it amongst themselves, and so therefore did not technically teach it. This sister represents the innovative and resourceful spirit possessed by so many nuns, as well as their dedication to teaching what they believe is morally right in the face of an often oppressive and discriminatory church. Whether you have faith in him or not, the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church has massive global influence. The importance of the church on a worldwide scale is unquestionable. Women in the church are looking to see to what extent Pope Francis will bring real change to women's lives. But many women religious are not waiting around for his permission to produce the church reforms that many Catholics view as desperately needed and long overdue. They are actively working to secure peace on earth rather than asking the needy to simply pray to achieve it in heaven. Robert Calderisi, in his exploration of the Catholic Church's role in reaching out to the poor and voiceless around the world, opens his introduction to his book, Earthly Mission, with a vivid image of the dedication, the sacrifice, and often the risk nuns take on a daily basis. Quote, somewhere in the developing world, a 57-year-old woman is trudging up a steep hill in the early afternoon. Sorry she could not come earlier when it was cooler or delay her visit until the evening. But the person at the top of the hill needs her urgently. She is a nurse and a nun, and the woman at the top of the hill may be dying. Throughout his study, Calderisi discusses countless cases of such nuns, cases that cause him to recommend that a woman become the next pope. He asserts that, quote, not everything that it strives to achieve before a woman does finally step out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica should be dismissed as worthless and hypocritical. As his book goes on to show, it is through the work of dedicated, motivated, and often unruly religious women that the Catholic Church has made an impact on addressing inequality and oppression. Unruliness presents itself in multiple ways in nuns' lives and writings. Sisters challenge cultural hegemonies and governmental policies or regimes. They also challenge the church itself. Many orders of nuns, as well as individual women religious regardless of order, have risked their lives to undertake the struggles of economically and politically and oppressed people. Consider Miriam Kesey's work for the Justice and Peace Commission in Dar es Salaam, Sister Mary Gabriella's opening of the first credit union for women in the garment history in South Korea, and Sister Mary Greneau's ambitious social action program for sugarcane workers in the Philippines. Some, like Dorothy Stang in Brazil, have given their lives to protect and give voice to the disenfranchised. More recently, Sister Lenora Brunetto risked her life in Brazil to stand up for the landless in the face of the environmental devastation brought on by illegal ranching. In a recent interview, the unruly Sister Leonora stated, quote, as soon as I get time, I want to organize a strike by all the women in the church all around the world. The church won't function without women. Such brave women have certainly jeopardized their already marginal position in the church hierarchy. Consider the Maryknoll Order of Sisters, who have been fundamental in uniting impoverished women in, for example, the Philippines, and giving them viable and sustainable means to flourish as an alternative to being paid near slave wages by multinational corporations. Also consider the School Sisters in Notre Dame at my own academic institution, whose primary mission is social justice, with a focus on the education of women and those living in poverty. Through their writings, we learn how these women act out their missions of social reform, challenge cultural and governmental policies, and attempt to reconcile their unruliness with their religious orders and the strictures of the church hierarchy. I'd like to wrap up my talk by reading a poem by one of the sisters who contributed to our volume of writings on unruly Catholic nuns. Here it is. Sister Julia Rice is a school sister of St. Francis in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She worked as a high school English teacher, a campus minister in Cleveland, and an immigration and poverty lawyer in Chicago. After retirement, she chose to make poetry her new career, and her poem is called The Nun Speaks to Her Church. "2009, the investigation of US sisters. When I was 17, it was a very good year. You took me and taught me, offered me security, fed me, sheltered me, veiled me. I passed the hours praising you, listening. You kept me close, and I feared losing you. When I was 33, you opened the windows, you invigorated my work, deepened my spirit, taught me to love. You freed my spirit to go unchained ways, Without losing you, I traveled far, adventured, enjoyed the foreign lands, here and far, healing. Now that I am 75, you do not trust me. Suddenly you think that I have been unfaithful. I am useless, wrinkled, worthless to work, worthless to you. You are so afraid of losing me, not me, but what I was, that you take away the shelter, the food, the clothing, the learning, the thinking, the freedom. Are you so embittered now that you think you know what to do about me? Will you now crucify me? 2014, the results. How little you knew about your women and about what is real. It was too late to scare me. How little I knew about how alike we were across a nation, across a world. Our learning, our thinking, our freedom are so deeply ingrained. Our spirits so united at a depth you cannot understand. Our faithfulness so firm, you could not move us anywhere but forward, away from confining rules. We are running together from that cross you planted to the original gospel, to the Jesus who lived with and for others, where we find our joy. Thank you for listening today. I do hope that my talk has shed greater light upon the work and the works of these sisters, and that it may inspire you to do your own research and writing about these unruly women. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a stimulating and thought-provoking talk. We're going to take a 10-minute pause for everyone just to use the bathroom and make a cup of tea and everything. And then we're going to come back and have about half an hour of questions or so, see how the conversation goes. I have lots of questions based on that. So should we come back at 2:40? That's about 10 minutes, isn't it? And then we'll have questions. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.